And I fully intended on just like going through my PhD in a molecular biosciences program. This is where like the serendipity begins, because I joined this lab, and 3 days later, an old graduate student was moving away to Oregon. He came up to me as he knew I was the bug person, and he said, "Do you want these ants? These are leafcutter ants, and I'm leaving, and I need to give them to someone." I said, "Absolutely, of course. I will gladly take them off your hands, and I will take the best care of them. Again, I'll just keep them in my lab. I'm not really going to do any research on them because there's no funding for that." Until 3 days later, a professor down the hall comes up to me and he says, "I found funding. Are you Juju? These are your ants. Do you want to study these ants?" And I said, "Yes, say no more. How did this happen?" So that is how I got into a molecular biology program and got to study my insects, and this did not exist before. So that is a little bit about that. And so now I'm going to tell you a bunch about ants. The talk ends in like 45 minutes, so you're going to learn a lot, and maybe by the end you will appreciate them as much as me. That is the goal. Okay, so we're going to go through what are leafcutter ants, the life cycle of an ant and a colony, the roles and responsibilities, and finally, at the end, I will talk specifically about my research and what I have contributed to this field of study from a more molecular point of view. Great, so what are leafcutter ants? I'm sure you have seen them. There's some outside, and they're quite easy to recognize, as they're the only ants that are going to carry around these large, cute little leaves. You see the green moving along the ground. They're here in Austin. So yeah, these are leafcutters. They mostly live in the tropics here, all throughout North and South America. If you go to Europe, you won't find them. There are two genuses, two genera, Atta and Acromyrmex. The Atta are here in red. Again, in the rainforest, there's the most lush green vegetation, which is where they're going most diverse. But we also have some here in Austin. Atta texana is our local leafcutter ant species. So this is we're very special to have these ants. They're not in much of the rest of the United States. Okay, so if you haven't seen them here in Austin, maybe have you seen some of these clearings? They're definitely more obvious in April when the vegetation from all the rain has grown up a little bit, and then you can find the clearings because they say they don't want any vegetation around their home. We cut it all down. So they're very easy to see here. And so if you look closer, if you walk up to one of these clearings next time, you might see the ants, and you might see them carrying these little leaves down into the ground. So if you're asking a question, well, the question is, well, what do you know? What are they doing with these leaves? Does anyone want to guess what they're doing with the leaves? Just shout it out.
Feeding the fungus.
They're feeding the fungus? Wow, yeah, you guys are a smart bunch, because normally, maybe some people would think that they're eating them, but they're in fact not eating them. They're in fact farmers. So yes, very good for those of you who knew this. They don't actually eat the leaves. They're taking them underground. They're little like fungus garden underground is what we call them, in these little chambers. And this is because they can't actually digest the leaves, but the fungus can. So this is like not so different than how cows have a bunch of bacteria in their gut to digest the grass that they can't eat either. They can't digest. So this is the leafcutter ant colony I was given. And I will go back to this photo, but it's very like makeshift, right? But we have this container number 1, and this is where I put the leaves that I've collected, and then they'll march it over, and you can see the 2 fungus gardens here. And I've got a ring camera to make sure no one messes with my ants. And yeah, so before I continue, we're going to go over a little bit about what a fungus is. A fungus is not a plant, does not use photosynthesis, and nor is it an animal. It does absorb its nutrients from its surroundings, so this is its own kingdom of life, is what we call it. If you play like Mario Kart, Toad is toadstool mushroom. We don't eat those mushrooms, but we do eat other types of mushrooms. We also like to say that fungus is neither good nor bad, it's just another type of life. So if your mom makes sourdough and the yeast that she uses to make the sourdough is a type of fungus. And then also when you don't eat that sourdough and you leave it in the pantry too long and there's mold growing on it, that's also fungus, right? So we have quite diverse fungus around here. And so rather than roots like plants have, or you look at a mushroom, the mushroom is only like part of the fungus. The vast majority of it is underground and what we call the mycelial network. And if we look in a little closer in mycelia, we have hyphae. So these are like a microscopic image of fungal hyphae. And so this is some vocab for you guys. And now here's the big vocab word. So this is, I'm not going to say it, because I think it might be sort of fun for you guys to try to pronounce this without me saying what it is. This is the ant fungus. Do you want to try to say it on three? 1, 2, 3. That's pretty good, yeah. Leucoagaricus gongyliflorus. So I'm not going to keep saying that word from now on. I'm just going to refer it as the fungus or the ant fungus. But this is, as I mentioned, there's 40 different species of leafcutter ants across the Americas. But the cool thing is they all farm one species of fungus. So this is the ant fungus. And so as I mentioned, the ants are giving the leaves to the fungus. So what do the ants really get in return? So the fungus acts as the ants' shelter. It's their home underground. It's a protective area. It's a very controlled environment as well. But more importantly, the fungus also gives the ants the food. So at these ends of the fungal hyphae, this is what a normal fungus hyphae looked like. But in the ant cultivar, the Leucoagaricus gongyliflorus has this gonglydia. And so that is where the name comes from. This is very specific to the ant fungus, and it is like a little lunchbox for the ants, right? It has everything the ants need. It's the sugars, the fats, the proteins. It's a complete meal. And so this is what we call, the ants have an obligate symbiotic relationship with fungus. Does anyone know or define for me symbiosis? Symbiosis.
You scratch my back, I'll scratch yours.
There you go. Yeah, so we say the ant has a long-term relationship, or a fungus, symbiosis is a long-term relationship between two species in which one or more benefits. And in this case, the ant benefits from the fungus benefits from the ants, and one cannot live without the other. And so to sort of summarize what we've learned so far, the ants are collecting leaves and they put it at the top of the fungus garden, and then the leaves will slowly get digested as it moves vertically down the garden. And then at the end, the ants pick up all the remains and dead things and move them to the dump. And so now I've just told you the ants farm, and now it looks like they also do some sort of waste management. And that is actually correct. There is a dump. There's a dump in this system, and its purpose is to remove all the harmful substances from the garden into a completely different place. So this is like, we have a landfill, but our landfill is not in the middle of our cornfield, right? Or we remove our trash from our house. We don't keep our trash in our kitchen sink. So this, again, keeps all the pathogens away. The ants are quite tidy creatures. So now if we look back at my photo of my ant colony, you have one in the fungus gardens. At the bottom of the fungus garden is where the gonglydia grows, and this is where the ants will eat. And then finally, this is the dump. So you can see it's like all the way over there. They move all the decaying and fungus. Also, all the dead ants, sort of like their cemetery as well. And they like to like recycle it. So like go in there one day, and all the dead ants are in one corner, and the fungus over here. And I'll go back, and they've moved the whole thing to the other side of the container. It's like they work all night, and I'm not exactly sure why. Yeah, question.
Where exactly is the dump?
Right here. This is my dump photo over here.
Right.
It's hard to see, but it really doesn't look like much because it's just a bunch of brown, like dead, scattered things. Yeah. Okay, so this is a little cartoon, and this is some more audience participation I'm going to go through. And does anyone, you can just shout out what the ants' role in the system is. What do the ants do? Very good.
Farmers.
Yes. And then what do the leaves do?
Fungus.
And what does the fungus garden do?
He's the it.
Yeah. And then what about the dump? Yeah. Very good. Okay, so now we're going to show you how big they can get. This is a photo. Alex Wild here, Field Station. He's taken a lot of these photos, so shout out to him. This is in Argentina, and you can just sort of see the entrance size of this mound. And this is a famous photo taken in Brazil of them actually uncovering one of the largest leafcutter colonies that they've found. And so they can get like huge. Again, this is in South America. The ones in South America get really big. Like this is 8,000 chambers, right? So I have one little fungus garden like this big. Now imagine like 8,000 of them. It goes 23 feet underground, like 2 stories worth. And when I say millions of ants, I mean like millions of ants, right? Up to 8 million ants have been recorded for a colony. And they can exist for over a decade, anywhere between 10 and 20 years. As long as a queen lives, that colony will survive. And so they can actually have a huge ecological impact, of course. That's just like one colony is like equivalent to what they say is a large herbivore in terms of how much leaves they chew up. So the percentage of leaf biomass is like relatively equal to 17% of leaves. They're the dominant herbivores in the neotropics, and they are like key contributors to decomposition, soil aeration, and nutrient cycling, right? So we're taking all the carbon from the trees and we're bringing it below ground, which is cycling the carbon from like the canopy into the dirt. So yes, very important, the keystone species, as people like to call them, of neotropics. All right, so now we're on to the second part of the life cycle of an ant and of a colony. So how does it all get started? And throughout this section, I'll say that part of my research, I have my colony that was given to me, but for reproducibility, I actually need more than one. I need to make sure that things are consistent across multiple colonies. And so the only way to really find a new colony is you can't just go dig one up underground, right? That would be quite invasive. We don't really want to ruin the precious fungus garden and ants in their native habitat. So the way to do this is to collect these queens on a special mating flight. And this happens one day a year, and so this is also somewhat of a story of mine of what happened last April. So to begin, what does the ant life cycle look like? We have our queen, and the queen is going to lay these eggs. And ant's life begins when the eggs hatch into these little larvae, which don't really look like much. They look like white blobs, but that is actually indeed what they are. Here's another image of a real one. And then larvae will grow. They're quite useless. They can't feed themselves. They can't move, so they require a lot of care from the other ants. Soon they'll turn into pupae, and then you see a clear one and a more darker one. You can tell the pupa is about to become an adult worker ant by this hardening in the coloration on its exoskeleton. And then finally, it becomes a worker ant at the end of this life cycle. And so this is what we call complete metamorphosis. And this is quite similar to what like butterflies go through and what bees go through as well. And so now you might ask, how does a queen become a queen? So it actually begins that when the queen, the other queen, will lay the eggs, and she'll lay little larger eggs. And from these larger eggs, they have more nutrients in them, and from that point on, these special larger eggs will get fed more and more protein, which will trigger specific developmental pathways in the ant, and that will lead to queen formation. And so this is sort of a more complete ant life cycle, and now you may see that I've assigned some genders, if you will, to these ants, and all worker ants are female. So that is sort of cool. It's a complete female colony, except for these males. And so the males are produced once a year. If you want to get technical, they have a single copy of their chromosomes, and the females have two. And right. So at the end, there you go. During a colony's life cycle, a colony is said to be mature after about 3 years, and so this is when the queen will start to lay these larger eggs and start to produce these like winged reproductives, or alates as we call them, as they have these wings. Right, so a colony is not going to really like lay these new queens or new males until there's like enough food in the colony and it's a certain size for it to be able to sustain itself. So we can sort of think as like an ant is a certain age, but there's also an age of the colony itself. And so these winged reproductives will, from before a queen is like an official queen, she's a virgin queen, she has not mated. And the males are conal drones. The males don't really have, they have a single purpose in life, which is to mate with other virgin queens during a mating flight, in which after a few days they'll then die. They're not allowed back in the colony. Their life is over. So this is what a mating flight looks like. This is Acromyrmex versicolor. This was taken in Arizona. Different species of ant here. And so this is great to go and watch because it's during the day. And so basically one day a year when the conditions are right. This includes the temperature and the humidity and what else? The temperature, humidity, and the rainfall. Yes, you need a certain amount of rain the night before. And when all those conditions are right on a single day, the ants will fly into the sky, all the ants in colonies in a single area, and they'll mate. This is how they spread, create genetic variation within new colonies. Yes, and so for my purposes, I'm trying to start new colonies I've never done this before. So I have to figure out what day they're going to fly, and I have one chance. And to make things a little more difficult, the ants here, they like to fly 15 minutes before dawn. You can't see anything. And for those of you who have lived here, this is what the forecast in April looks like. And so when I say that the ants will fly after a half an inch of rain, you're like, oh yes. When will the ants fly? When? Today, tomorrow, Saturday, whenever. And also you might know that if you see this on your phone, it might actually just rain like one of those days or like none of those days. So this was a interesting time for me. I'm like walking around, like looking at the sky, like, will the ants fly tomorrow? And when I say that they fly 15 minutes before dawn, that means they fly like 15 minutes before dawn, which turns out to be around 5:50 in the morning. So if I'm going to collect these ants, I need to be awake at a certain time and like prepare everything. So I really, my sleep was like, also like, it might rain, it might rain half an inch, but if it rains after midnight, the ants all crawl back inside. So I'm having to wake up at like 1 in the morning to see if it's actually raining, and like checking like all these websites that count like how much rainfall has happened. Yeah, so interesting time. And this photo, which I keep repeating, is actually taken when I was looking for the ants on the ant flight. Yeah, you can sort of see here that these little like, these are the winged queens. Yeah, so, and the winged reproductions, and fun story. So when I took these photos, some friends were with me, and we were going out there, and like no one's supposed to be there. No one knows where these things are. I know where the colony is, and I know that on the day that the ants tend to fly, you don't go near the entrance. Like normally, if the entrance is here on a normal day, you can like stand here. It's like good enough distance away, because otherwise the ants will come attack you. On the day the ants fly, they're all above the ground. They're like making sure that these reproductives are protected. So if you were to stand here, you'll get attacked. So you need to stand like all the way over there. The radius of the ants is like drastically increased. So I go over there and I hear this noise. And I'm like, what is this noise? This is not an ant noise. This is like a large animal. And I like look in the bushes with my flashlight and I see a guy. And he's hiding in the bushes and he's like sort of freaking out. He doesn't really speak English, and he has his shirt off. And I'm like, oh my God, what is going on? What is happening? Why is this guy here? And I finally, it like dawned on me. I'm like, oh my God. He probably didn't know where this ant colony was. He's looking for it. Blah, blah, blah. He's looking for it. And he has his flashlight, can't see anything. And he finally finds it. And by the time he finds it, it's way too late. He has thousands and thousands of angry ants crawling up his legs, all in his clothes. And so he had to run away and just take his shirt off, and he was freaking out. Yeah, so long story short, don't really try to do this unless you know where it is.
So he was a competing molecular biologist?
No, he was not a competing molecular biologist. Yes, so let's just say after the ants fly, it's something you can observe, hard to do in Austin because it's dark outside. But the next thing to do will be to go try to catch the queens after they've mated. And so that will be, in my case, is at random gas stations out in like sort of rural areas where there's not as much light pollution, because the one gas station will then attract all the lights, all the queens to the light, and you can find them running around, scurrying on the gas station concrete. And so the next, the queen, after she's mated, will fall to the ground. She'll take her wings off so she can start digging. She'll try to find dirt. And with her, this entire time, she'll have this little piece of fungus in her mouth that she took from her mother colony. So this is key to the success of her new colony that she will soon find. So hopefully she doesn't drop that, because it's funny to say that she could drop this fungus morsel, but it does happen. So here's my little map that I drew for you guys. This star is where I watched the ant flight. If you ever go to Roy G. Guerrero Park, there's like a ton of leafcutter colonies you can see.
Which bird?
Roy G. Guerrero.
Oh, Guerrero.
Yeah. So there's a star, and I'm like trying to find gas stations, and some of the gas stations had like no ants, and I'm like, oh my God, my PhD is over, I can't find ants. And then I go to this one, I was like a bolero, and we showed up, and everywhere. There's squished ants everywhere. The truckers are like, what is this? The owner of the little like convenience store is out there with a broom sweeping them away. And I'm like freaking out, like, oh my god, we gotta go catch all of the right ones. But like again, so the queens, you have to make sure they've mated, and so one of the signs that they've mated is that they've taken their wings off. So a lot of them still had wings on, or like you were finding males, so it was like a little pretty stressful, let's be honest, but like an experience of a lifetime. And so hopefully this April I'll go back and I'll like know where I'm gonna go. Yeah, so it's basically out till like 10 a.m. I was up at like 3 in the morning, 10 a.m. collecting queens, and I went back to the lab to try to put them in special containers. Okay, so here's a fun question. How many queens do you guys see?
One.
One? Yeah, so there is actually 4 queens. These ones haven't taken their wings off, and the male ones have small heads. Okay, so here is after I collected, I found 26 queens. Which I would say I definitely don't need 26 colonies, but the mortality rate and the success rate of finding a colony is quite low. Another thing I witnessed while collecting the queens is like I finally see one, and I'm like, go get it, I'm about to go get it, and this bird comes down and swoops it away and eats it, and I was like, oh my god, this is a disaster. So I put them in these little brown dirt containers. I put 2 queens in there. Normally in nature you're going to have 1 queen per colony, but in my case the colony success rate is increased if you put 2. And yeah, so at the very beginning it's just the queen, right? So this is the queen is the original start of the colony, and first thing she'll do is she'll spit out her little fungus morsel and she'll lay 2 sterile eggs on this, and this is what the fungus will grow on for the beginning. This is after 12 nights, you can see it grow a little larger. It'll grow in this little like disc shape. And then, if you're lucky, you will have caught a mated queen, which I think I only got like 3 or 5 out of the 26 I caught. And so you can see the little larva, and the little pupae have these little legs. And as it grows up, you'll get the pupa start to have eyes. And now you're like really excited because now you're gonna get worker ants soon. And then you get them hatched, and this is so exciting. I had like only had like 1 actually successful queen so some of them they lost their pellet, so I from my other colony had to like take some fungus and put it in that container. So they'll actually like take up fungus if you give it them. So I had 1 though that didn't need any help from me. That was queen number 4. Yeah, and so after a while, then the fungus will start to grow bigger and start to grow the little chambers. And the garden can grow, and grow, and grow. And it was also very fun for me to like experiment about which types of leaves and plants I wanted to put in the garden, and then you could see them put it in there. And this is actually part of my research. So this was I don't know, maybe that's why I did a specific project. I'll explain to you guys later. But I thought this was pretty. Yeah, UT, I like to consider myself part of their gardeners because I would go around and just like grab plants from like the landscaping over and over and over again. That was a little bit of a problem. So they get bigger and they'll get bigger. And I just like to repeat the slide after this because this just shows you what can come from just 1 single leafcutter queen. Yeah.
Do these really large colonies have multiple queens?
I would say no.
Oh, okay.
Not necessarily for leafcutters. It's common
okay.
for other ant species to have multiple queens, but I feel like in nature it's usually just 1. Yeah.
So it's 1 queen, right, laying all those eggs. How many?
Yeah.
How many eggs does the queen lay?
A queen can lay up to like 200 million eggs in her lifetime.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Good job.
Do you know how they discovered this? Like, how did they dig it all up?
So they think they poured concrete in it.
Oh.
Yeah, I think it was an old one. It wasn't like still alive when they did that. Yeah. Yeah.
Is that all one male?
No, so a queen will mate for like 3 to 8 different males at once, and then she has a special organ called a spermatheca, where she'll all the sperm from that one mating flight will be saved, in this organ, and then throughout her life she'll fertilize eggs when she needs to. Yeah.
What happens when a queen dies in a colony? Does she get replaced by another queen, or does that colony die off?
It becomes, that's difficult. I think the colony will then try to find a new queen. They generally, the queen like has a lot of pheromones, like control over the colony, and so there's like a lot, generally some fighting involved, but, and like they don't necessarily know if they should feed more or not. Maybe they'll go find a new queen, but yeah, it's complicated. I think it also depends on the species sometimes. Yeah.
How do you measure or estimate the depth of the community?
The size of the community. So that's a little difficult. There are some signs you can look for. So certain like types of workers, which I'll go over in a bit, a colony will only start to produce those types of ants if it's reached a certain size. So like, for example, like these super soldiers, you'll know like after however many thousand ants, if you see one of those, you know the colony's over that size. Yeah. Also, you can sort of like tell if you go to one of the like in Zilker, you'll see like some dirt mounds, and you can just like see the size of like, there's like one main entrance, it seems. If the main entrance looks really big or smaller, then you can tell like how big the colony may be. Yeah. Great. Okay, that was a good time for questions. So, as I said, we were just sort of talking about how many ants there can be, and one of the most impressive things about ants, in my opinion, is like, again, how are they so organized that they have all these things, and there's really no like audible communication. They communicate a lot through their chemicals, but really like who does the work and who decides who does work is pretty interesting. So this is what we call the caste system. It's a division of labor amongst the colony. So it may look here that we have like one, or how many species of ants, maybe multiple, but this is in fact just one species of ant, and the physical differences are generally like a good telltale sign of what jobs they may hold in the colony. So I'd like to go through some of these. Again, we were talking about the queen. She lays the eggs, that's her role. There's two queens here, but normally there's one. And she can live for 10 to 20 years, and as I mentioned, like up to 200 million eggs, which is like thousands a day. Quite impressive. And then after a baby ant hatches into an adult ant, the adult ant's, the worker ant's job immediately becomes a nurse. And so that's so she can stay in the nursery and take care of her younger sisters. And this is a good photo. You can see some of the eggs here, and then the larvae still look like blobs. The pupae have these like, where you can see their legs, and then a melanized pupa is like one that's about to hatch into a worker, and then here's a newly emerged worker, right? She's still not quite as dark as the normal one. Yeah, cool photo. And then some of the other small ants in the colony, as we were talking about, the small size, the microscopic hypothreads. You can't obviously have like one of those big worker ants using the mandibles to like move those things around, they're way too big. So there's special garden workers that are like the smallest size, and they have their little mandibles are like the perfect size to be able to pick up those microscopic fungal threads and move them around. We also have these waste workers, so they remove all the dead fungus and other dead ants. And generally when they like pick up in larger colonies, if they pick up dead fungus and they go to the cemetery or the dump, they're gonna stay there because we don't really want them to infect the rest of the fungus garden with some whatever pathogens was on the dead things. Yeah, so now for the more famous ones, we have these like the larger workers. These have the most toughest mandibles that they use to cut the leaves, and so you might see these around. And then so they'll cut the leaves and they'll like go move them around some distance away from the leaf, but they're not generally the ones that are moving them back to the colony. Then we have these other workers, they have a different job, and they're the ones picking up these leaves, and they'll move them down a distance. They have like a range, right? They'll move them here, and then the next ones will move them there. It's sort of like an assembly line until it gets all the way back to the nest. Yeah, so generally if you see an ant cutting a leaf, it's not the one bringing it to the garden. There's many other workers that have a role in bringing that leaf there.
Did I understand that the workers that empty the trash, that's a one-way trip?
So that's why I think it's like, there's some that'll move the fungus away from the garden, and they move it to like, again, sort of like this, like the assembly line process thing, but the ones that are in the dump area, they're really not going back to the garden.
Okay.
So here's the fun ones. The soldiers, or the super soldiers, this is like very specific to leafcutter ants. They're the ones that have these like massive soldiers, and they have these big heads. And big heads are filled with muscle to power their little mandibles. So these are the ones that the guy without the shirt was getting attacked by. They're like, if you go like knock on a colony, they're the ones that are gonna sprint out. They specifically evolved to attack the large like vertebrates that may disturb the colony, all the other invaders. Okay, now, does anyone want to guess what these ones are doing, or are they just lazy?
They are protecting the leaf.
No. They're inspecting the leaf? No. Okay, so in nature, there's actually a bunch of these little flies, and they like to lay eggs, and are precious little ants. And so the ants that are in charge of carrying the leaf, right, they're like, they've already got too much going on. They can't really deal with these nasty little pesky flies that are trying to lay eggs in them. So there's specific groups of ants that like hang out on the leaf, and they get a free ride, but their job in turn is to make sure that they swoosh away all the flies that could potentially harm our precious little carrying ant.
How do they swoosh away the flies?
I don't know. Probably bite them.
Open research question.
Huh?
Is that an open research question?
This is open, yeah, there you go. That someone could go get their PhD on that one. All right, so a lot of this, what I've talked about so far, has been a lot of good research in this field. And so I would like to say, I found a lot of this out. This has all been there. So what I've contributed to the field is more from a molecular biology perspective. And I'm specifically working on how does the fungus break down the plants on a molecular level, and do the ants contribute to this? And so before we talk about plant degradation, we have some plant biology. Leaves are not easy to digest. So we might think like spinach is good, but there's a lot of other plants out there that are not easy to digest, and this is mostly because of the plant cell wall. So in the plant cell wall, which basically allows the plant to stand up, give it its rigidity and structure, there's a lot of compounds in there, what we like to call cellulose, hemicellulose, and lignin. So think about like eating a piece of printer paper. Printer paper is mostly made up of cellulose. That's not really like that edible to us, and also we're not going to go chop bark off of a tree and eat that. And so fungus, though, as you may recall, is good at breaking down these plants and good at growing off its environment. And so it can get its nutrition by breaking down these plant cell walls. And how it does that is by using these proteins, what we like to call enzymes. So we also have enzymes, but there's many, many different types of enzymes out there. And the fungus has various particular ones that are sort of rare in nature that allow them to break down these plant cell walls. So we like to think of them like little tiny scissors that can go in and cut up the plant cell walls. And when they do this, they'll release a bunch of nutrients, which is what the fungus will absorb in their hyphae and use it to grow off of. Okay, so here's a really cool photo. You can see these threads, and then this is like when I fed the ants rose petals. They put this in there, and then you can take a cool photo of fungus breaking down rose petals. And okay, so not all plants are created equal. Some plants are easier to digest than others. Does anyone want to guess which one is the most difficult one to break down? Yes. So this is also what we like to call sugarcane bagasse. It's a huge agricultural waste, just like corn stover. And the reason it is hard to break down in terms of, like, from what I would like to think of, is it has more complex compounds in their plant cell walls. A lot of the easy sugars are gone. There's a lot more lignin, which are harder polymers in the plant cell walls. And so this requires completely additional enzymes that are rarer to break them down. And so in nature, the ants are really like going to find the easiest food material to give to the fungus. They're not going to go out and search for like the hardest material. So they're not really going to feed them the sugarcane in nature. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the fungus doesn't have those enzymes that can break them down. So my question is like, okay, well, I can give them maybe this clover and I can give them this rose petals, and then I'll be able to see what enzymes they use to break those down. But what happens if I give sugarcane bagasse? Will I be able to identify some novel enzymes that weren't previously known, or like we can learn about more how the fungus actually adapts to different food types to see if it can actually break down these harder plant substrates. And so I recently got this data over break, and I did find that, like, yes, the fungus does adapt to change the substrates, and it might seem a little obvious, but as I mentioned, there's not many labs that work on leafcutter ants from a molecular biology perspective, and so there's like still so much to learn, which is quite exciting. So I have found that the fungus does adapt to the changes by using different enzymes and different transcripts at an RNA level, and so we can like look at these enzymes and compare them to other enzymes in like other different fungus. And so that's like the first half of my project, and then the second half is I'm going to look at these pretreatment enzymes, which I didn't necessarily talk about. So I'm going to let you guys guess where the pretreatment may occur within the system. In the mouths of the ants. It's a good guess. It actually is because the ants poop on material. And so there's a bunch of enzymes in the ants' poop, and that's what I'll be studying next. I'm going to Costa Rica in 2 weeks to do this, and with that I will end my talk. Like big big thanks to Edward Marcotte, Ulrich Mueller, Alex Wild, and Matt, who gave me the original Leafcutter colony and the rest of them are top now. Yeah. And with that, I'll take questions. Yeah.
How many colleagues do you have going now?
Let's see. So I have a big one, and I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 new ones. Yeah. Also, this is my Instagram, where you can see many ant videos if you want to.
So next time we'll be able to see Maton as in April, or is it March?
And when?
When will, during the year, can we observe the Maton?
In April.
In April.
Yeah. Whatever day in April the ants decide to fly. I can text you. Yeah.
Are there other members of the fungal kingdom that take care of the dump?
That take care of what?
The dump?
So of the fungal kingdom, there is yeast. There's like known to be certain types of, a lot of other organisms live within the fungus garden. There's a lot of research done on the types of bacteria that live in there, and there's also yeast in there, and there's like a pathogenic fungus. I almost started looking into those that live in the dump, but it's actually quite difficult to deal with that substance, and so I'm not exactly sure. Yeah. Yeah.
How do you queens find the ideal location to dig and start the new colony?
So
Like, or not?
they'll fly up, and then they'll probably fly down. It's sort of a tumble down, and she'll look for loose soil.
Just loose, any loose soil?
Yeah,
Just
the
like,
good soil.
there's not like any ideal location. Like,
Well, generally, so they're not going to fly too far away from where they came from. I'm not sure the exact distance, but I'm eyeball mile maybe. So like they're probably already an ideal location-esque if the colony was successful enough to release new queens. So I'm gonna look for some soil. That's
So
a good
you find
question.
them in the Bolero and then they fly?
No, so the ones that ended up at the Valero probably aren't going to make it because there's concrete there and they're not gonna fly. Yeah, so I was trying to catch them after they mated, and like you could go out into the dirt, but there's no like, the lights from the gas station is like a beacon. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So how and why are their cuts so perfect?
Yeah, so they do know this. Let's see if I can go back to one of these images. Maybe like the very first one. Here. Okay, so you can see in this photo that their legs are like specifically like grabbed onto that thing. And so they have two mandibles, and one is like stationary on the leaf and the other one like moves in a saw-like motion. And they'll use the leaves and they sort of just go like tick, 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 like that. And so that's why they're circles. Yeah.
Are leafcutter ants like territorial with other ants or like other leafcutter ant colonies, or do they fight or do they work together?
No, they don't necessarily like each other. Ants like their community, they don't like other ants.
How big of a space?
But
is
there's
colony?
different ants are like, there's different levels of aggression per like ant. Yeah. What was your question?
How big does like space does it like need for like?
Does it need or can it like take up? Can it take up like what? Underground? What did that look like? A half a football field is something what I've read. The big one. But like, I don't know, if you go like right here at Zilker, I keep talking about this one. You can see the entrance to the Leafcutter ant colony, but then like 3 feet away there's like a little harvester ant entrance. So like they can be next to each other, but I'd imagine like their tunnels definitely don't intersect. Mm-hmm.
So what's the main difference between the two genuses of leafcutter ants?
Atta are a lot bigger.
Okay.
They can get a lot more number-wise abundance. Acromyrmex, I'm pretty sure they're like more diverse in their maybe lifestyles and what they collect and stuff. I would double check that.
Alright.
Yeah?
Seen the leafcutter ants carry like little sticks as well.
Oh yeah.
And what are the sticks used for? I've seen that.
So this is my question, because you'll see them collecting all this random stuff. And it's also interesting because, so as I said, there's 40 different species of leafcutters from like Texas to Argentina. Some of them only collect dicots. Some of them only collect monocots, which are like different types of plants, right? But it's the same species of fungus. And the fungus reproduces clonally, and they've tried to sequence the genome. But so you're sort of assuming that the fungus has all the necessary genes to break down every single type of plant that the ants could collect. So then why are the ants so particular about collecting only type plant this, type plant that? And then there's also sort of like, some of the ants will like go collect stuff. So I, on my colony, drilled a hole in the side of the thing, of the container, because I was trying to connect it to another one. And so there's plastic bits inside. And some of the ants take the plastic and they move it to the garden. And then some of them move it to the dump. And it's like, okay, what are we doing here? Like, do you think that the fungus can actually break that plastic down? And maybe it could. The other fun stories you hear are like, my friend was in Costa Rica and she hates these ants. Because she was camping and she woke up and they had chewed up her sleeping mat. And they were carrying her sleeping mat away. Which I'm like, maybe they were completely onto something, right? The whole group of them is picking them up and moving them. Maybe they can digest nylon, who knows? Yeah. So the stick question is like, I'm sure there's something, in my opinion, there's definitely stuff that, because I found that they could break down sugarcane bagasse to an extent, some of the stuff. So like the sticks, there's definitely stuff in there that they could use. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Like, from an evolutionary perspective, like how could such a complex system come to like exist? Like,
Come to exist?
yeah.
Well, I think you can ask that about a lot of things, right?
Yeah, but
So what? You want some numbers? Ants evolved like what? They really came to like be abundant like 100 million years ago, and then about 60 million years ago, they just found like new paper. Leafcutter ants like sort of evolved 60 million years ago, and the idea is that they would live in these like lush, dense environments in the tropics and very humid and moist, and they live with like fungus, right? Like they're just around, and then if they're collecting leaves or something. This fungus used to actually mushroom, so it was a normal like decomposer, and it would grow off of like decaying plant material. So there's leafcutter ants. There's a bunch of fungus growing ants out there. Leafcutter ants are the ones specifically given the name that collect fresh plant matter. So there's other fungus growing ants that will grow fungus and like collect decaying plant matter. But the leafcutters are famous because they were able to get, their fungus was able to evolve and like re-evolve the genes to break down the like intact plant compounds. So time. That's how. That's the answer to your question. Time. Yeah.
Did they do a lot of damage to the fellow who stumbled into their colony when they were?
I would imagine. I'm not sure he'll be back this year. Or maybe he will. Yeah.
How do they keep the fungus garden at like a good temperature?
Yeah, so it's very interesting. They're very good at maintaining the humidity. It's tough for me because I don't surround mine with dirt, but like in nature they like know how to like, the gardeners are the ones that are like, okay, this needs to be open here and whatever. Termites are very good at that as well. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
How do they learn the complex tasks? Like how do they, like I know ants can sometimes like switch jobs. Like how do they know what they have to do?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think you should go study that. Yeah.
I've only seen them in sandy river bottom soil. Have you seen them in other environments here in Central Texas?
In sandy river bottom?
Well, like sandy soil along the river,
Oh,
like floodplain.
yeah, I think they sort of like that. I'm trying to think. I haven't really ventured much outside of Austin to look for them. And there's a lot of riverbeds here in Austin. which is
Well,
where
just
I've
like
seen more.
clay soils here in
Oh.
Austin or limestone.
I'm not too well versed on soil types. I don't know. There's one by campus that's not near a riverbed. So that's maybe one answer, I'm not exactly.
But you can see, you can look at the mound and see, oh, this is sand versus clay, right, cracks and stuff.
Oh, I would say I've only seen sandy looking soils. Yeah. Yeah.
Where's the one in Zilker?
You could probably find it. It's by the volleyball courts.
Okay, so like where the big rocks are on that side?
No, more by the trail.
Okay. Volleyball courts by the trail.
Yeah.
And the train.
Okay.
So whenever your defense is, can I come attend it?
Vicky? Is it public?
Sure.
Sure. Our defense is public?
I think our defense is public.
Then yeah.
I don't think anyone's gonna
was the
stop you
question?
from walking in.
Is my defense public?
Oh, your PhD.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Is it scheduled?
Is
No,
it
it's not.
scheduled? No.
Okay.
I have a few more years. You have to wait a few more years.
No. I should just keep on the molecular biology website.
Yeah,
Look for
yeah,
things. Okay.
yeah.
All right.
Maybe I'll give another talk here on the poop part. Of
Or follow her Instagram.
You can follow my Instagram. Yeah.
Okay. All right. I want to hear it.
Yeah.
Can you tell me a bit more about why and how they dispose of the dead ants? I've seen them carrying them and I've seen some graveyards, but I also read that some species like store them in chambers.
Oh, yeah, so the dump, depending on the species of leafcutter, will keep the dump like above ground or below ground. I can't tell you exactly. Some of them will, yeah. I don't know which ones do which, but like some of the dumps will be definitely be in the little like image I showed you of the dump all the way like at the bottom, and that's so like, well, the decomposition, like with the chemicals going in and out, the like CO2 has like a direct route to rise. Other ones will just bring it directly outside of the nest.
And taxono?
That's a good question.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure it's in the soil. I haven't seen any above. Yeah.
Why did you choose rose petals and clovers for the experiment?
So, because I could take the rose petals from campus and the clovers from campus.
Cool.
How much do you feed them every day? Like, what does that look like to take care of a colony that big?
Yeah, that was a problem, because there was a point in the spring that I was just like, this is not sustainable. I need to find a different food source. We're working on that. Some like the small ones that are like, the fungus is like this big, you could give them like a rose petal and it'll take like more than a week for them to like chew it up. But like for some other ones that are like this big, if you give them like this equal mountain rose petal, it'll go through it in a week.
Does grass work?
I haven't tried that. It's annoying because I'll go and see them out in nature and I'll see them like taking whatever greens I see them. So I'll be like, okay, I'm taking this because I know the ants will eat it, and I'll put it in mine and they don't touch it. And so I'm just like, I'm picky, a little bothered right now, to be honest, about why they're so picky. Especially just because it just froze and my fungus gardens have like dropped in size because I haven't been finding the right food for them because all the food just died. So I've been feeding them dried rose petals, but they need more like moist vegetation sometimes to maintain the like water content in the garden. So I have a little water tower thing, but I think
So lettuce doesn't work?
they'll like, you know, I should just try it again, to be honest. Yeah. It would definitely need to be organic.
Do they have a favorite plant or some plants that you see them utilize more?
Yeah, so I was told oxalis, which is what wood sorrel, but again, I just put it in the little container and they haven't touched it. So one of them has, the other one hasn't. They'll eat rose petals or the chinaberry tree leaves, which don't have any leaves right now, and like orange pulp.
How do you get orange pulp?
Yeah, there's a pain. I was looking at the colony here, or the one right here, and it looked like whoever had messed with it had just put the orange peels in them. I was under the impression that the chemicals or like the spray of the smelly stuff in the orange thing the ants weren't gonna like. So I always try to like razor blade off the inside, which was too difficult for me to keep doing that. But they just put the whole thing in there, so maybe that's what I'll try next. Yeah. Sort of every day is different. You never really know what you're going to see.
Sounds exhausting.
It was fun. Yeah.
Do you know if the Gunglidia, like, portion of the fungus only serves to feed the ants? Is there any other purpose, like, use for it by the fungus?
No, that's its only purpose, is to feed the ants.
And
Yeah.
do only, like, mutually obligate fungi produce, like, have Gunglidia?
Only the ant cultivar has the Gongolydia. So like one of the ways to like make sure you've got the ant cultivar, make sure you have Leucogerus gongophorus. You're trying to isolate it, so I've been trying to like grow it on a plate by itself. But there's a bunch of other fungus that could be in the garden. So when you like isolate it and you're growing, the way to make sure that you have the ant cultivar is to look under a microscope to look for those Gongolydia. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So you said the fungus used to be a mushroom fungus and grow above surface. It evolved to not do that anymore. Could you?
Yeah. So way back when, whatever.
Was it 60 million years
60
ago?
million ago it started as one that continued, and there was like a climate changing event. So they were mostly in like these moist forest areas and expanded, and then the area dried up. So when they were doing this below ground, the fungus can't really grow outside of the ant habitat because it's now dry. And so that was sort of like, it got isolated from the rest of the like gene flow of that fungus species. And then the ants, from what I've read, the ants like prevented the fungus from like mushrooming and reproducing on its own, like clipping away at the sporulated things to keep it like on it's sort of like how, yeah. The other really interesting thing about, because like really pure ant agriculture, another analogy thing that I read. So I've tried to assemble the fungus's genome and do that, and it is such a mess. And it's not unlike some of our plant cultivars that have completely multiplied the number of chromosomes it has to like increase yield. And it seems that may also sort of be happening, but it's just a mess. The genome. What was your question?
I guess it evolved to no longer be able to
Oh yeah,
mushroom.
so it doesn't mushroom anymore, no.
But I like the whole explanation.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do they have any like major predators?
The ants?
Threats to their population?
The ants?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I went to Ecuador in 2018 in the rainforest. I didn't know I liked ants yet. We were supposed to walk around and we were looking at all the ants. They knew I was in the rainforest, and they knew where the leafcutter ant colonies were. And we were very excited to go see it. And they were gone. And they were like, there's one over here. It was gone. And they told us an anteater came over there and just completely demolished it. Yeah, can you imagine that? Awful. Huh?
Can there be like competing fungus? You know, like other spores and things in the soil?
Yeah, so that's the gardener workers. A really important job is to take out all the weeds, so when the ants bring in the leaves, they'll also there's processing. They'll make sure it's sort of clean enough, and obviously no seeds in there. But there's also always going to be other microbes in there, and there's a really solid microbiome in the fungus garden. But there's also other fungal pathogens. So Escovopsis is a common one that will try and take over the fungus garden. So if you have an infection in the fungus garden, you might see them just start really taking away a lot of the fungus garden, moving it to dump, or if the humidity is too high and you start to see condensation, that increases the ability of the pathogens to grow into the garden. So there's a lot of effort into making sure it's a monoculture. Yeah.
In nature, what's, I'm fine.
We'll just